The NHL Atlantic Division, one of the hottest divisions in hockey because it is dominated by top-end juggernauts like the Tampa Bay Lightning, Toronto Maple Leafs, Florida Panthers, and even the original six, Boston Bruins, who still have some bite to their game. But guess what? The Ottawa Senators, Detroit Red Wings, and the rebuild of the Habs and the Sabres may have something to say about this hotly contested division this year, or at the very least, they may be good enough to cause disruption and be a notable pest in the Atlantic. This is the NHL's most popular division by viewership, thanks to the Habs and the Leafs. This is also home to the Stanley Cup finalist Tampa Bay Lightning for the last 3 years, with 2 out of 3 going their way, and young, up-and-coming hot teams. So why is this division so good, and why is it going to be so entertaining again this year? Here's why. As always, we tier rank within our division. So we have the Bedard sweepstakes as tier 1. We have wild card bubble teams tier 2. The 4-5 wild card position contenders is tier 3. A 2-3 contender as tier 2. And a div winner as tier 1. Before we get started on this video, remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell on, and join our Discord channel if you want to get a hold of Coach Ryan D, as well as a big shout out to all of our members on the coach's staff down below. Smash join. You can join at any time this season if you'd like to support the channel. But as always, the free subscribe and thumbs up is more than enough for me, along with a saucy, chirpy comment down below. Now, starting with the first team in our ranking this year, which is unfortunately the last place team in this division, according to Coach Ryan D, before we play 82 games. That is going to be the Buffalo Sabres. The Buffalo Sabres have one of the most energetic fan bases in the NHL. Yes, the building is empty some of the times, but at the end of the day, if you were a fan of Buffalo, this proud city, home of one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Josh Allen, cue cheap pop, go Bills, baby. Look, Cowboys fan, but I can respect a good football team when I see it, but the Buffalo Sabres themselves have not made the playoffs since 2011. This team feels like it's been in rebuild for a very long time, and there's an entire generation of Sabres fans out there that have never seen success with this team, and there's some troubling reasons for that. The organization has been really rocky, and it's been tough to get going. Now, yes, they've had some of the best drafts in recent NHL history. Yes, they have some of the best prospects in the NHL right now, and yes, they have some of the best fans, but until this organization turns it around, Coach Ryan D still sees them as a rebuild, and I see that this year as well, although one step closer to the playoffs. This is a team that's going to be pesky, and this is a team that is going to cause problems for some of the top teams at the Atlantic, and they are going to have playoff implications on some of the big boys. When we take a look at the roster for this team, it is not a heavily favorable roster right now, but it is a roster littered with future potential. First big thing we have to talk about is, of course, going to be Owen Power, one of my favorite defensemen in the NHL already, and he's only played 8 games. He looked awesome for the Sabres last year, in my opinion. The young man is a puck-moving monster of a player up front. He's one of the best skating defensemen out there, and he joins Rasmus Dahlin as one of the best skating defensemen in the NHL. The difference between Power and Dahlin, though, is the fact that Power, I believe, has better decision-making capabilities, and Owen grew up in small rink hockey. When you play for Team Canada in small rink hockey, the transition to the NHL is easier, and when you are a smooth skating Swedish defenseman like Rasmus Dahlin, who is used to all the open available ice that Europe has to offer, it can take some time to transition into the NHL game. Dahlin is entering his 5th season in the NHL right now. That's mind-blowing to say, but he still has oozing talent and potential. We've seen flashes of it. He had an excellent rookie season. He trended in the wrong way for some time, but he's starting to trend up again, and I think the addition of Power to the back end is going to help him with that, because Power has proven he can log 20 to 21 minutes a game against the best and be somewhat successful considering he is that young. When we take a look at the rest of the back end here, I think it's pretty serviceable. Lyubushkin is the only guy I really want to call out. He was one of the big additions to Buffalo this year in the offseason, but I think the steady Eddie defenseman in Ilya Lyubushkin brings a lot of stability, size, and grit to a Buffalo team that is clearly getting bigger and a Buffalo team that wants to make some noise. Looking up front, Tage Thompson gets the absolute new this year. Thompson, Skinner, they are going to carry the first line, but the question then becomes, is Alex Tuch a second liner with Middlestead, or is he going to move up with Tage Thompson? And finally, I think the team's success is going to be predicated on young guys like Peyton Krebs and guys like Dylan Cousins. Krebs and Cousins took some time to develop here in this system, and we're going to have to end up seeing how these guys end up doing, along with Jack Quinn. Is Jack Quinn going to make some noise this year? We've saw guys like Seth Jarvis, we've saw guys like Anton Lundell, and we've seen guys like Cole Perfetti have faster success, although drafted later than Jack Quinn, but it can take some time for guys to balance into the roster. So how Krebs, Peyton, and Jack Quinn do this year is how the Sabres will go. Unfortunately, even though the talent is oozing in potential right now, I think they're still 1 to 2 years away from any type of playoff tipping success. Moving on to number 8, we have the Montreal Canadiens. The Habs had a busy offseason this year, and unfortunately, the biggest piece of news and why I have Montreal so low is I think this is it for Carey Price, both in Montreal and in the NHL. Injuries have just caught up with Carey Price, and this team has been built around Price for a long time. It's funny, you can't appease Montreal fans no matter which way you go. You say Carey Price is the best goalie in hockey and the heart and soul of the team, and they'll tell you there's way more players to count on than Carey Price. Then you tell them, hey, look, this team is more than Carey Price, and they'll say you're not giving Carey Price his due and just desserts. At the end of the day, Carey Price is Hall of Fame assured. Price is one of the best goalies to ever lace him up in the NHL. He's going to be tough to replace, and I do not believe you're going to be able to replace him with the combination of Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault. Now, moving up from goaltender, we take a look at the defenseman. Jeff Petrie, not there. Shea Weber, obviously his contract resides in Arizona. Joel Edmondson, David Savard, and Mike Matheson end up headlining this defensive core. Look, Mike Matheson, in my opinion, this is the best defenseman on this team right now. I think he's a good deal for the Montreal Canadiens, but when I look at this defensive core, this definitely is a core that needs a few more draft picks, in my opinion, in order to move forward. Looking up front, the big questions for Montreal Canadian fans this year is newly minted captain Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. Is Suzuki ready to take on that #1 role under Marty St. Louis? The answer from the organization is a resounding yes. I've been a huge Suzuki fan since I've been in here, and if Martin St. Louis, Kent Hughes, and Jeff Gorton are going to anoint him the new captain of the Montreal Canadiens, which is an honor taken extremely seriously in Montreal, both by fans and franchise, then you can bet that this guy, with the financial commitment that he's getting, as well as the backing from the organization, is going to be their guy. Cole Caulfield, or Goal Caulfield as he's called over there, is a snipe show, ready to explode with more goals. This guy's got 30-goal seasons written all over him. I'm not too worried about these guys. The question down the middle then becomes Christian Dvorak, who to me is no better than a third-line center. I didn't like the deal last year. I don't really love the player this year, but he's solid and he's serviceable. He's not bad. I'd rather have him on my team than against. I just thought he was over-celebrated by the fan base and the organization for coming in. He needs to move down to the third line because that's where he's going to thrive, and that is because Kirby Dach has to find a way to take a step forward in his career and move up to that second line. Dach is an absolutely impressive specimen of a player, but he's underperformed since being taken #3 overall by the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm hoping he can take that step forward under St. Louis, who is a real players coach and is known for getting the best out of his players. Sean Monahan may or may not end up suiting up for the team this year. Only time will tell. And obviously staples of Montreal like Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, and even newly signed last year free agent Mike Hoffman need to make an impact, along with Joel Armia, who has been a staple on one of the better fourth lines in the NHL going forward. However, with all this positivity going forward in Montreal, the big question ends up, will their first overall pick, Slafkovsky, end up making the lineup? There's a bunch of NHL-ready players in front of him, but I think so. I don't know why you would send him back, in my opinion. He's 6'5". They're impatient with their rebuild, in my opinion. I think he ends up making this team on the third or the fourth line at minimum, or why not even scoot him up there into the top 6 and see how the big boy does. Only time will tell if Slafkovsky ends up making it. The one thing we can be assured to know is, your opinion or my opinion aside, if Martin St. Louis thinks he's ready, then he's ready. If Martin St. Louis thinks he's not ready, he's not ready. In St. Louis, I trust. Moving over to the wild card bubble now, we have the Detroit Red Wings. This is a team that is teetering on the playoffs. I don't think they're quite there yet, but this is the #2 overall franchise in the NHL according to The Athletic in terms of prospects. And are you surprised? The Yzer plan is in full effect there in Detroit. They have one of the best young defensemen ever in Mortz Seider down back there with them. I think this is going to be a very exciting team to watch. I think this is a bubble team that could make some noise, and heck, maybe they even do sneak into the playoffs. Bertuzzi, Larkin, and Raymond are going to headline their first line. Larkin is an excellent player along with the goal scorer in Tyler Bertuzzi. Andrew Kopp comes in this year on free agent acquisition along with David Perron. I love Kopp in the middle six. As a Jets fan, I've seen him his entire career. I think he's a very versatile forward, and we saw it with New York. He's going to add a lot of punch to this team. If David Perron can capture the magic he has in the playoffs, then I'm telling you right now, the leadership of Perron and what Yzerman likely sees in Perron is the same thing I see. When big time games matter, David Perron shows up. Dominic Kubalak comes in there as well. And you know what? This team, it has potential. When I take a look at it, even their goaltending core potential. Husso and Nedeljkovic. I really liked Nedeljkovic as an adding last year, but he's starting to look like maybe he is just a serviceable backup, but a high-end backup. Ville Husso actually unsat Jordan Binnington from atop the mountain in St. Louis, but Binnington regained it in the playoffs as Husso tended to choke a little bit there for St. Louis. Binnington got his crown back, but Husso has shown flashes of brilliance in the regular season, and I think between the tandem of Nedeljkovic and Husso, this team could make some noise. I believe this team will be clawing its way to the top of this division shortly in the next 1 to 3 years. But right now, I have them as a playoff. Moving over to the 4-5 wild card spots, it's going to be Boston and it's going to be Ottawa. I actually have Ottawa outranking Boston this year. First hot take right now. Normally people go, oh, you just did what happened last year. Well, the NHL doesn't really change that much year over year, but I think Boston could be in a little bit of trouble this year. They're still supremely talented, but this is it. Last dance for the Bruins with this team. Bergeron and Krejci are trying to rewind back the clock here with a new coach in town. Can the Boston Bruins end up doing it? The big question is going to rely on the fact with Charlie McAvoy and Brad Marchand's injury and surgery recoveries. What do they look like when they return? And can Boston weather the storm in a powerhouse Eastern Conference as well as Atlantic Division and stay relevant in the playoff race? Swayman and Ullmark are a really nice tandem back there. Swayman, I believe, is still the better choice out of the two. I've been saying it over and over for the better part of a year and a half now for the Bruins, although Ullmark has had his moments of brilliance back there as well too. The good news is in the regular season, when one falters, the other can step in. You have two serviceable starters back there, which I love. Lindholm in his new contract is joined by Matt Gryzlyk, Brandon Carlo. Gryzlyk, though, as well, also injured to start the season. So you're going to be looking at guys like Lindholm, Carlo, Clifton, Forbert, and Riley to lead the way. No Matty Gryzlyk, no Charlie McAvoy. We are talking about the second best defenseman in hockey, Charlie McAvoy, behind Cale Makar. I've said it. I've been saying it for a long time. That guy is awesome. Matt Gryzlyk is a top 30 defenseman in my opinion as well too, cracking the top 20 here for Coach Ryan D's top 30 defenseman rankings. But without those two players, that's a lot of minutes that go missed. Looking up front, Hall, Krejci, and Pastrnak are going to start the year. And will Pastrnak end up re-signing in Boston? It's not looking that way, but you never know what can happen in the Bruins because the Bruins are willing to throw a lot of money at players at times. At other times, they're historically stingy. Pavel Zacha comes in as the offseason acquisition to join Bergeron and DeBrusk. DeBrusk has been slowly getting better, and I love their center depth this year, which was their biggest problem last year because now you're going Krejci, Bergeron, Coyle, as opposed to Charlie Coyle being forced to play in the second hole behind Patrice Bergeron. To me, it doesn't matter what line Bergeron plays, first line, second line. Bergeron is their best player on this team above Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak. You've heard that. Until Bergeron decides to exit stage left and take his bow, this is one of the best players that has ever played in the history of the NHL. But the question is, can these guys survive injuries to three of their best players? I guess we'll have to wait until December to see, but I actually have them at number 5 right now, mostly all actually because of those injuries and because of the surging Ottawa Senators. Oh boy, are the Senators exciting this year. This team and the rebuild is officially over now that all they need to do is start performing. Cam Talbot takes the net here. He's a proven starter. I have never been a huge Cam Talbot fan, but you have Anton Forsberg backing him up. Cam Talbot is serviceable enough to get you to the playoffs, but I do think in order for this team to push for the top of the mountain in the Atlantic Division in the next 2 or 3 years, they are going to have to get a better answer in net over Talbot, but Talbot can still help them make the playoffs this year. Captain Brady Tkachuk, newly contracted Josh Norris and Drake Batherson likely headline the first line. Tim Stutzle ends up moving into the second line. This guy could have a massive breakout season this year. He's joined by Alex DeBrincat and Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux brings in exactly what you need to this team, that veteran leadership that knows how to win in the playoffs thanks to his time with Philly, as well recently his time down in Florida. DeBrincat coming over from Chicago, really, really nice addition into this, and we know very well how good Norris, Drake Batherson, and Tim Stutzle are, never mind the sandpaper that is Brady Tkachuk. Looking on the back end, Jake Sanderson should end up joining the top 4 this year for this squad. He was out all of last year. I'm excited to see how he ends up performing. We also know Thomas Chabot is one of the best defensemen in the NHL today. So this team has a ton of potential. I think they're going to be a popular pick to be a borderline playoff team, but I'm actually saying they're going to unseat the Bruins this year. That's my hot take heading into the season. Taking a look at the 2-3 contender, I'm actually going to end up leaving this one blank. That is because the division winner could be any of these 3 teams. I think the top 3 teams in the division are easily the 2 Florida teams. We're looking at the Panthers, the Big Cats, the Bolts, as well as the Toronto Maple Leafs. I have them in order with Tampa Bay being 1, Toronto 2, Florida 3, but you can put them in any order you want because it's going to be a bloodbath come the playoffs. Starting with Florida, first big question, does Coach Paul Maurice, one of the most popular guys in the NHL and previous coach to my Winnipeg Jets, does he finally get that Stanley Cup he has been oh so close to in Winnipeg making a conference final, and with Carolina not quite getting there before he was terminated? Does he finally get there with Florida? Go get him, Coach Paul Maurice. Class act, fantastic, A+ human being, but I don't know if he has what it takes to take a team over the hump. Well, here is your chance to prove it, Mr. Maurice. Coach Paul Maurice has always had a rebuilding team that he's taken as high as he can take. This is the first time I've seen Paul Maurice be gifted an A+ squad and an A+ roster, so let's see what he can do with it. Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight are going to headline what you need in net. Sergei Bobrovsky can take you to the promised land if required. The back end does lose Mackenzie Weegar, but no big deal when you got Aaron Ekblad back there. Absolute stud among studs. He's going to be joined by Forsling, Carlson, and Gudas. I love these guys. Even the back end with Stahl and Montour is a really nice top 6 for this team. Ekblad should be able to log easily 23 to 26 minutes a night. The guy's an absolute stud and a monster. I love what I see from the back end, and I love what I see in the top 6 here for Florida. Looking up front, Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk, the newest toy, the newest plaything for the Florida Panthers. Sorry, I thought that was funny. I hope you did too. But Tkachuk brings the Panthers what they need. Watching them play against the Tampa Bay Lightning last year, it was clear they need more sandpaper up front, and Tkachuk's going to do that along with over 100 points. He can score, he can hit, he's an agitator, he's everything this team needs. Bennett and Reinhart are going to appear in your top 6. These guys are proven playoff pieces. Anton Lundell will start on the third line. It'll be interesting to see if he ends up staying there. There's a lot of depth to this team. There's a lot of depth up front. I have them placing 3rd, but that is only in a very tight margin because I like the Leafs and I really like the Bolts roster slightly ahead of them. But hey, if Florida ends up number 1 again or even wins the Cup, don't be surprised. The Toronto Maple Leafs, number 2, and there's a whole crowd of Canadian Maple Leafs fans going, yeah, he said Toronto, it's our year. And there's a whole nother half of that crowd going, I'm a Leafs fan, we've been here every year, call me when it's the second round. This is a very divisive roster. It's a very divisive team. It's a very divisive hockey market. But one thing we can say for sure that isn't divisive, it's the most popular team in the NHL. And the most popular team in the NHL is going to be joined by one of the best first lines in the NHL with Bunting, Matthews, and Marner. I still think Matthews and Marner are A+ players. I think Austin Matthews is the 2nd or 3rd best player in the NHL, depending on where you rank Cale Makar. I rank Makar 2. I rank Matthews 3 right now. But Matthews can easily be ranked anywhere 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you see the game. He's that good. Mitch Marner is a top 5 winger in the NHL. No matter what anybody says, he is that talented. Looking at their second line, John Tavares, still a premier player. He's had ups and downs, but that's the Toronto media market for you. They're going to be hard on players. I'm outside the Toronto media market. I'm in Winnipeg. I like what I see from Captain Tavares. Willie Nylander is still a talented piece and always talk for trade speculation, but I think he's only been going up, up, and up with his play. Kerfoot looks nice, and then you take a look at Calle Jarnkrok coming in here as well. You have Peter Engvall, who's taken a huge step forward. David Kampf, who's proven to be an excellent third-line center. This top 9 looks good. I hope that Jarnkrok can actually take a step forward. I was excited for him in Seattle. He didn't do too much. I thought it was a great trade piece for Calgary. Didn't do too much. But if there's one thing Kyle Dubas has been excellent at, it's been bringing in value players. Sure, he's missed on Nick Ritchie, whatever his name was, he's gone, but he did hit on a bunch of other players before that. There is no more Mikheyev in this roster, and that does leave a hole in the middle 6, but I think that can be filled by Engvall. Then you've got Wayne Simmons and Aube-Kubel coming in on the 4th line. I like the addition of Nicholas Aube-Kubel. It looks good. You know my opinion on Morgan Riley if you've been on this channel for some time. Stud. The man's a stud. He's a staple back there. Timothy Liljegren, this is a rising up-and-coming defenseman. He deserves to play in the top 4, if not on the top pairing here for Toronto. He is one of the best revelations, and Toronto quietly has one of the best back ends in the NHL. Jake Muzzin, TJ Brody, Mark Giordano. Yes, Justin Holl still back there, but whatever. I don't think Justin Hole, however you say his name, he's an absolute hole of a defenseman because he just sucks in happiness and fun and spits it out into utter sadness because he just doesn't know how to play in front of a net. I don't care what his underlying numbers say. I think the guy sucks. I think there's other players that you can end up moving in there, but he's still going to play on this team. Matt Murray is the answer in net. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really like this play. I like Jack Campbell a lot better, and I didn't like Jack Campbell. So, hey, Oiler fans, good luck. But Matt Murray is an upgrade, a slight downgrade in my opinion, but maybe he can capture some of the magic he needs. However, it has been hedged by Ilya Samsonov, and Samsonov is a guy I love on this roster because he could take over the starting job from Matt Murray. He gets an opportunity in a wide open goalie battle on a team that is pressured to win right now. Kyle Dubas has not been extended, so this may be his swan song, as they say it in Toronto. It is cup or bust for the Leafs this year, and they are going all in on Matt Murray. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, but overall, the top 6 in terms of the defenders are amazing. The top 9 forwards are incredible. This should be a top 3 team in terms of goals in the NHL this year. The Tampa Bay Lightning lost to the Colorado Avalanche this year, but hey, hot take, I actually think the Lightning have a better roster than the Avs this year due to the exits that happened on the Avalanche this year thanks to salary cap constraints. This is still an unbelievable team, and the only thing people are going to talk about this year is, 1, this team load manages going into the playoffs, so they could easily be in position 3 and still win the Stanley Cup and be the favorite. That's just what Tampa Bay does. Number 2, people are going to talk about the fact that they're tired. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I do think they have a great chance to get to their 4th Stanley Cup final in a row because they are led by Stamkos, Point, and Kucherov. And yes, everybody in the playoffs has to deal with injuries, but I'm very confident that if Point was there and healthy, this would have been a different Stanley Cup. But that is part of the playoffs. You got to manage injuries. However, you've heard me say it before, you lose a top 3 player on your team in defense, goalie, or offense. It doesn't matter. You can't recover from that with depth. It's just not the way the NHL works. So Stamkos, Point, and Kuch headline your top 3 players in the team up front. Killorn, Cirelli, and Hagel are still absolute beauties back there in the middle 6. Nick Paul and Ross Colton back there are still going to be massively impact players. And then you have one of the best 4th lines in the NHL with Maroon, Bellemare, and Perry. You have Victor Hedman and Cal Foote up front. Yes, you lose Ryan McDonough, but you gave all that money to Mikhail Sergachev. I don't think that was a good contract, but at the end of the day, he is a top 4 player for this team. And then you go ahead and put in Eric Chernak back there, Mr. Shot Blocker himself, and this team looks ready to go again. And then when you have Andrei Vasilevskiy, arguably a top 3 player in the NHL himself, maybe number 1 if you value goaltending that high, this team is absolutely still primed to make a deep run and win a Stanley Cup. No matter what happens, Yzerman built it. Tampa Bay capitalized and won. Do I think the new contracts match what Tampa Bay was known for? Not necessarily. but there's still a few great seasons left in this team. All right, there you have it. Tampa Bay, Toronto, Florida, Ottawa, Boston, Detroit, Montreal, and Buffalo. No matter what happens, it's always fun to put out lists. It's always fun to put out rankings. You let me know if I got it right down below, and we will walk you through the Metro Division this week as well too. But while you're taking a look at it, why don't you go take a look at our rankings for the Central Division as well as the Pacific Division here on Hot Garbage Sports.